Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal News Hour. Thank you all for coming. We've got a great group tonight. Thank you all so much for arriving. I appreciate it. It has been it's been a long week in the news, but I'm a little bit in recovery today because I had 3 interviews today for the show, but also it was my birthday on Saturday and we spent the weekend hanging out, playing video games. I had like my 2 shots of whiskey I have for a year. I won't drink again until New Year's. We had a really good time. We went to Outback for dinner with my buds and it was great. We had everything. We had a bloomin' onion, we had fries, we had steak, I got dessert, and we just went crazy with everything, and it was a lot of fun. It was a little bit of drama at the restaurant. They wanted to sit at the bar, and obviously I'm not a person that necessarily fits easily in a booth, but if the table's movable and I have thin friends, then I can move it. Like, I need like 2 inches. Move it 2 inches. They're a little less closer to the table. I'm less squished all as well. The table was bolted to the wall, so we had to wait for a proper table, and then they set us at a 6 top, but whatever. So that was a little awkward and a little weird. But I felt bad for my friends who were with me. Also, I kind of got back into gaming a little bit, and one of my friends bought me a controller for my birthday, which was really cool. So we picked that up, and it was just a whole adventure, and kind of got back into playing Fortnite over the weekend, which I haven't played in 4 years since I went to grad school. And I realized I lost so much of like my work-life balance and everything between growing the business and going to grad school for 2 years and relationship and cross-country moving. I haven't really spent a lot of time like actually having fun. So it was really healing to just take a couple days and just not even read email and just have fun. It was really nice and very recharging. I'm a little slow today because we're still recovering from the weekend. But it also, I had 3 interviews today, so we're a little slow coming into the news hour this evening, but it was really good. Thank you to everyone on social media who wished me happy birthday. Thank you everyone who replied to the newsletter about my birthday. I appreciate that. Thank you all very, very much. Yeah, it's been fun. It's been interesting. And it's been good. Now I'm fully into being 37, which is crazy. I've been talking about it and kind of having some existential crises, some of which you'll hear on the interviews as they come out over the next couple months, but it's been a lot. But we're through it, we're in it, and we're moving forward with everything. So that's fantastic. It's been a busy week in the news. If you are subscribed to the newsletter, which you should be, head over to CameronJournal.com/newsletter to go, or just anywhere. If you go to, it'll pop up. There's a pop up. You can sign up. If you go and check that out, I did talk about this on Saturday, although it's gotten more press today, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. Is the explosion in Iran. Right now at 7 o'clock, if you check my socials, I just posted a thread that I put together today about it, but there was an industrial explosion in Iran over the weekend. I talked about this in the newsletter. Not everything that's an accident is an accident. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But there's definitely rising tensions. Someone sent me a video of some missiles possibly from Iran going to Israel. Iran has attacked Israel in the course of their war in Gaza. And we're going to get into that and the Biden administration and ceasefire, which, yeah, new reporting has that. We'll get there. We have a lot to cover, but we'll get there tonight. So, there's kind of rising tensions there. We have rising tensions in India, Pakistan. I got a lot of texts from different contacts and things over the weekend, and it's really crazy out there right now. So it was kind of nice to have a little bit of a break for myself. But then Monday we just started right up with everything. And we have some new executive orders out of the Trump administration. We have the big story though is what's about to happen economically with China. I have several things on that. We're going to work through some things with that. Um, but we have a lot. So without further ado, I'm not going to bore you with anything more from me. Let's get to the headlines. So let me do this, and let me do that, and then we'll do that. There we go. So we're not going to start with this story though. We're going to start over here. Um, so only my glasses on so I can read. 37. We have to borrow our glasses now. Um, and so this is kind of the beginning of this kind of six tab group about China's the trade war with China sort of thing. Um, even some of the side stories are tragic. U.S. agriculture isn't nearing a tariff crisis; it's in a full-blown crisis already. Ports are empty. Freight bookings are down. And so it says here warnings of empty store shelves have been in the headlines as multiple press reports indicate that the CEOs of America's top retail stores told President Trump that a prolonged trade war would lead to shortages. What could then become a reality and what product categories would be hit first? Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent recently described a trade war with China as, quote, unsustainable. Already a decline in manufacturing orders from China and a plummet in Chinese freight vessel bookings and sailings to the U.S. are edging the national supply chain closer to a tipping point. But when does the supply chain reach the point of no return? When currently paused orders need to be re-upped for the supply retail chain to be replenished? Apparel and footwear are one key consumer product area to watch. It says here that the average tariff rate for apparel and footwear imports from China was about 18.5%, but for many it is much higher due to additional duties. When you add 145% on top of that, you get an average figure exceeding 160%, but in some cases the actual tariff exceeds 200%. It also shows shipments from China to the U.S. for Amazon, IKEA, and Walmart on a 7-day rolling average. And it also, so that's Amazon, this is IKEA, this is Walmart, and it says the risk of retail shortages will depend largely on how long the unsustainable tariff levels last, and the extent to which companies front-loaded inventory in the early months of 2025 based on Trump's threats. A Chinese government minister recently said, quote, at present there are absolutely no negotiations on the economy and trade between China and the U.S., unquote. If the tariffs do indeed go lower and are considered more manageable to absorb, production orders could resume and shipments could begin again. But if the high tariffs continue, expectations are that the U.S. consumer will be faced with persistent shortages, especially as Chinese suppliers concentrate on other markets. If that happens, the U.S. supply chain will then have to compete for manufacturing capacity. The next several months will provide critical information about the health of the supply chain, said Michael Salerno, Vice President of International Banking at FNBO, the First National Bank of Omaha. It says here that many of these blank sailings have been announced with very limited advance warning to the shippers. And there's been cancellations. Low margin, fast moving goods disappear first. That's definitely part of it. The other, I don't think this is the story with the stuff from Shein. Oh, here we go. Big box retailer inventories are the only storefronts that may experience inventory pain, depending on the severity and length of a trade war. With Armstrong affecting drop shippers, businesses or individuals who operate online stores loading inventory, and those relying on de minimis tax exemption from China, also being impacted starting on May 2nd when that trade loophole is closed. That is what's going to affect Temu and Shein. In other stories, I've seen people say literally if you need to buy something, buy it like today, the next couple days, because we don't know what we're going to have in terms of supply of things, moving forward, especially anything coming from China. So I wanted to kind of start with that as a basis to kind of structure our thinking about what the dependency is, what could happen, and where when the empty shelves might really start because the cost is just too prohibitive. So the first kind of thing is we know, and I've written about this and we've talked about this before, that Scott Bessent wants to achieve lower interest rates, cheaper money, a devalued dollar, and lower borrowing costs. So with the trade war happening, um, it's a difficult thing because as we found out during the pandemic, and this tweet states it very well, you cannot fix a supply shock with either fiscal or monetary stimulus. Real consumption is set by the quantity of goods and services available, and tariffs pull those real goods and services out of the economy. Lowering interest rates won't make more stuff, it will just make more inflation. She's responding to this tweet from James Fishback, who is saying, "Oh, American interest rates are begging the Federal Reserve, please lower interest rates," and they're convinced that Jerome Powell is doing it to spite Trump, and that's not the. It really is this. They finally got inflation down to 2.4, which they did last fall before Trump took office. For those who think that Trump did that, no, Trump inflation was down last fall. They finally got inflation down, and I actually just posted on my LinkedIn newsletter. For exclusive for business owners, the story of Biden's soft landing. If you want to go see business owner stuff, linkedin.com/n/Cameron Cowan, you can subscribe to the Cameron Joel newsletter. It's exclusive to LinkedIn and is written for the business owner. So it's not as for the public as my newsletter at CameronJoel.com. So, but I do write interesting stuff there if you want to go check it out. Anyway, they've got inflation under control, and she's absolutely right. If they lower interest rates now, it will boost inflation and it will not solve the supply issue. As we saw during the pandemic, you can dump $6 trillion at the problem, but if the goods aren't there to buy, you're not going to solve the problem. Now, I do understand to have lower interest rates to borrow money to build a new factory, whatever have you, but those things will take years to bear fruit anyway. And it says here that the people who are mad that Jerome Powell won't save them from the political consequences of Trump's actions are simply confused. Dropping interest rates would not make voters happier except very temporarily. It would make them madder after the inflation surged, which we have shown in recent memory. People are still complaining about the high cost of living, which they should. They're still complaining about prices going up and never really ever going back down, which they should. And this would only make those problems much worse. And so I wanted to now that we kind of understand the situation in China, this is very important because you're going to hear this in the next couple days. You're going to hear more attacks against Jerome Powell, the Fed, interest rates, probably from Trump, at least from Scott Bessent, all this sort of thing. And so you need to kind of understand right now, that's not the solution to the problem. The problem is the tariffs, because more cheap money to chase those goods at the higher prices is just going to drive inflation. And then we're going to be back to where we were in 2022 with that sort of small recession stagflation period we had under Biden that they conveniently tried to not call a recession even though it was. So, moving on to the next one, container bookings. So, I love this account, by the way, Spencer Hakineman. I don't know why I'm not following him. I should be. And it's showing that you have container bookings from China on the U.S. are falling sharply. So this was in February, and now we're off 40%. And it's basically if if it's coming from China, if it's a product from China, which literally tons of stuff is, including packaging, like plastic bottles, glass bottles, all this sort of thing. I mean, anything, this was probably made in China, all this sort of thing. Even, stuff that's not, like even this Pepsi that I've been nursing all afternoon that's now hot. The Pepsi's made here in America, the bottle may not be. Or even the cap. I mean, you'd be surprised where this stuff is, where it comes from, all this sort of thing. It's, gonna be out of, out of control in just the most, terrible way. And so the fact that this is, kind of what's happening and everything is just, it's devastating. There's really no other way to put it. It's devastating in terms of trade. And the longer this tariff situation goes on, and the longer that neither side blinks, and Lord knows, Trump may blink first, but I think he's trying to hold out on this one, is the worse this is going to get. And by the way, and this kind of, I think we have another story about this, this doesn't get fixed quickly. It's not an on-off switch. Those containers are going to go somewhere else. those shipments are going to get rescheduled. It will be, even if Trump said today, on April the 28th, 2025, the tariffs are over, this problem is 3 to 6 months. And again, you don't even have to believe me on this. Just remember COVID. We've been through this in very recent memory. Just remember what it was like with COVID. That's how long it will take to fix this. And that was one of the things that CNBC story pointed out, is that, the longer this goes on, the longer it takes to fix. Manufacturing capacity goes elsewhere, and then all of a sudden you have to get back in line behind everyone else for manufacturing capacity, which means you could end up with not getting stuff for 3, 6, 9, 12 months. This is the situation that we're facing, and this is going to have devastating economic consequences. When you can't get the plastic bottle you put your product in, you're going to lay workers off because you can't sell your product. When when stores like Target and Walmart can't get new goods, they'll close stores and lay people off and leave shelves empty, or leave the stores open what they can get but lay people off all the same. I mean, this is going to ripple throughout the entire economy, and a lot of regular working people are going to be hurt. This is the other kind of interesting aspect of this that I kind of enjoyed. Is people have kind of forgotten that we're in the middle of trying to decide if we're going to ban TikTok or not. Now, the law was passed, and Trump has extended. They're trying to close a deal for the sale of TikTok to an American company with a lease on the algorithm. That conversation is not happening right now. I've written about that in a couple newsletters. And this kind of reminded me of this whole situation, of how random this all is, how unplanned it all is, and how we're not getting the type of considered, planned response in this situation that we need. And it says here something very profound here about the whole Trump experience. Trump stepping over Congress to punish Chinese manufacturers, his tariffs, while stepping over Congress to unpunish Chinese social media, his stay of the TikTok ban, is one of the clearer cases where I don't think it's possible to really articulate any coherent ex-ante strategy for this administration. The best a Trump explainer or defender can do is watch what he does and explain after the fact that it's brilliant. So you get a bunch of very or mildly clever ex-post explanations, but nobody can tell you what's going to happen next week. How's this supposed to work for 4 years? I don't get how you run an economy with a bunch of priests standing on a lottery ball machine explaining why each new number is the perfect expression of an infallible God. And he's responding to the Chinese manufacturers flooding TikTok and other social media apps with direct appeals to American shoppers, urging people to buy luxury items straight from their factories. And amid the threats of sky-high tariffs on Chinese exports, Americans seem to be all in. The pitch in the videos is people can buy leggings and handbags exactly like those from brands like Lululemon, Hermes, and Birkenstock, but for a fraction of the price. They claim, often falsely, that the products are made in the same factories that produce items for those brands. American influencers have embraced the videos, promoting the factories and driving downloads of Chinese shopping apps like DHgate and Taobao as a way for shoppers to save money if the price of goods skyrockets under President Trump's tariffs on Chinese imports. DHgate was among the 10 most downloaded apps in Apple and Google's app stores last week. And this sort of, I think the big story with the trade war is not that, we need to rebalance it with China. We do. We need to, do so. It's the uncertainty. It's like, tariffs are up again, tariffs are down again. It's there's no certainty. You can't plan ahead. And as another person's going to point out in a minute, you also can't. You're not going to spend money building a factory if you have no idea if the tariffs are going to protect that factory and that business. You're not. You're going to wait and hope it all blows over, which means you're going to have capital sitting on the sidelines. That's economic death. Or it gets redeployed elsewhere, and that also is economic death in that sector that then has to re-attract capital, re-attract opportunity to make something happen. This is the economic consequences of this are going to last for years. No matter what happens, and he's absolutely right, you can't tell what's going to happen next week, which means no one's planning and people are getting nervous and just sitting on the sideline hoping to see something that happens. Now, obviously, other deals have been cut other places, in Europe, with the EU. Other things are in progress. But the fact that nothing, supposedly no negotiations even happening, which are not even having conversations, is not a good sign. Because functionally speaking, you're going to basically stop trade between the world's two biggest powers. Now, on the other side, China has quietly lowered tariffs on certain things. They're not completely opening their markets for obvious reasons, but they are lowering some tariffs on some certain things. They're still not, allowing exportation of rare earths, which we need, and all this sort of thing. We're going to have to start to mine those themselves or buy them from Canada at only a 10% tariff. This is the problem. This is where it all gets mixed up. Now, I can understand on something that's national security being very defensive towards it. That only makes sense. But we all don't necessarily need to punish people for shopping at Shein. Now, you're a terrible person if you shop at Shein already because the clothes are terrible. They're made in slave conditions and the fabric is appalling. But I'm not going to judge you for buying cheap clothes from Shein. I'm not going to judge you from buying cheap things from Temu. But that right now, that's where the punishment is going. And the fact that all these manufacturers are, and I've seen these videos, are out here being like, buy from us, all this sort of thing, is a very, different and sad situation, and part of the economic consequences. There's even a visa now you can buy to go to China and shop for a week, if you can believe that. This one, speaking of the economic consequences of this one was very important, and this was in, Bridgewater, their largest hedge fund, sent out their newsletter, and they said, we've been through many big economic shifts over Bridgewater's 50-year history, so we don't speak lightly when we say that this looks like a once-in-a-generation one, adding, quote, they see exceptional risks to U.S. assets. And the, one of the things that kind of the downside upside of the global trading system as it has existed is it has allowed the United States to become incredibly wealthy. It's allowed us to export our inflation onto the rest of the world. It has allowed us to live far beyond our means for a long period of time because we built a system that will allow us to do that. And that's all coming to an end, mostly because we didn't do anything to help the Rust Belt recover from the end of industrialization in this country. And the fact that we are in the opinion of Bridgewater, not that I love hedge funds, I don't, but the fact that they're saying, look, we're in the middle of a huge economic shift and U.S. assets may be less attractive, that's when you start getting capital flight. That's deadly too. It's like you could end up with this terrible kind of nightmare scenario where you have capital flight, you have trade barriers, you have capital sitting on the sideline, you have foreign investment going out, all this type of thing, and you can end up with a situation where you end up with mass unemployment, mass foreclosures, bankruptcies, all this sort of thing because, we've ended the system that has allowed this to go on for as long as possible. And I realize there are some people that voted for that. And I realize that there are some people who think, oh yeah, it's going to, get better in time, and we can suffer through a painful recession, which means we get a better economy. They don't understand how long it takes to make these shifts. You want to bring jobs back to America? Great. You want to move production out of China? Wonderful. COVID's gonna look like it was easy compared to what's coming, and people complained about that. And when you want to talk about inflation, if we're reindustrializing, the amount of money that would be spent on new factories, yeah, you're going to get jobs out of it, but inflation is going to be tremendous. And the price you think prices are up now, way more when you have American cost of labor behind it. And so it's going to be tough times ahead. Now, we can debate on the merits of making these changes, but the reality is that you're looking at very, very difficult economic times ahead, and that's going to mean unemployment. That's going to mean people losing their houses and losing their cars, getting divorced, and never forget, for every 1% the unemployment rate goes up, 400 people die. Usually by suicide, usually men. The toll in life for this could be huge. Things to sit with and think about. Now, turning our attention, when I found this, I loved it. So, this company, Athena, I forget what they make. Oh, they make shower heads, that's right, and shower filters. They did a test. Says here, everyone says they'll pay more for made in the USA, so we ran an A/B test. Says here, we make filtered shower heads.
Clean, sleek design, but more importantly, the best shower filters on the market. Our best-selling model, manufactured in Asia, China, and Vietnam, sells for $129. But this year, as tariffs jumped from 25 to 170%, we wondered, could we reshore manufacturing to the US while maintaining margins to keep our lights on? An important part is to mention that most of our filter materials, KDF 55, is sourced from the US, so technically we partly source from Asia. We found a US supplier. The new unit costs nearly 3 times more to produce. To maintain our margins, we have to sell it for $239. So we created an experiment. We created a secret landing page. The product and design were identical. The only difference, one was labeled Made in Asia and priced at $129. The other, Made in the USA, at $239. The visitors were given the choice either buy Made in the USA or buy the Made in Asia version. The results were sobering. Add to carts for the US version were only 24. Conversion, 0. Not a single customer purchased the Made in USA version. So, it says here, visitors, 25,650. Add to carts, Asia, 3,000. Add to carts, USA, 24. Purchases, Asia, 584. Purchases, USA, 0. We tested everything. Color, copy, layout. We ran it over multiple days and traffic sources. Same outcome every time. For a moment, we thought we made a technical error. We hadn't. This wasn't a failure of marketing. It was a referendum on price. We wanted to believe customers would back American labor with their dollars, but when faced with a real decision, not a survey or a comment section, they didn't. It's not their fault. Most people are stretched. They're feeling inflation everywhere. Gas, groceries, mortgages. Supporting U.S. manufacturing becomes a luxury most can't afford, even if they want to. This is not just our problem, it's the economy's. Small brands like ours want to manufacture here. We're willing to invest, but without serious shifts in consumer incentives, automation, trade policy, the math doesn't work. Not for us, not for our customers. We're still committed to exploring local manufacturing, but for now, it's not viable. We're sharing this because the numbers surprised even us, and we think they're worth talking about. If policymakers and pundits want to rebuild American industry, they need to grapple with this truth. Idealism doesn't always survive contact with the price tag. And I thought, this is where the rubber really meets the road. In terms of, how, and also how much more expensive things could be, in the future. And how, if we were really to do this, the type of money we'd have to pay. And again, how much lower your standard of living is going to be. How many other things, say the Made in Asia option is no longer there, and if you want this shower head, you have to buy it as $239. What other things are you not going to buy because you paid $239 for a shower head? How many businesses don't get off the ground because the prices has to be too high? How many people can't start a business? This is all the secondary order consequences that never get talked about, but are very, very important when talking about this. So when I saw this little case study from a nice, normal brand, this man, Ramon Van Meer, is right here. You can email him. You can call him on the phone. He's a real person. Right here in America. And they're already being like, this is, kind of, regardless of how you think about it, hard to make it work. So, I also want to, oh yeah, that's Biden. All right. I also want to, kind of, having gone through all that and processing all of that, I want to kind of flip the script a little bit. This thread is kind of talking about China versus the U.S. as systems, and how, China is not necessarily our enemy, that perhaps we have more bigger issues. So it says here, Americans are told they're free, but what is freedom when your roads are crumbling, your water is poisoned, your hospitals are bankrupt casinos, and your leaders are bought by defense contractors on Wall Street? What is freedom when you're too broke to leave your town, too sick to afford a doctor, too scared to speak your mind at work, and too propagandized to even recognize who's robbing you blind? They trained you to hate the word communist so they could steal your future with the word capitalist, and they called it patriotism. But here's the truth. Real patriots aren't the ones waving flags. They're the ones tearing down illusions. Because no, the problem isn't that America's too free. It's that it's too obedient, too loyal to a system that feeds it lies and calls it liberty.
Americans don't need to fear China. They need to study it, to ask, why are their trains faster? Why are their cities safer? Why are their people healthier, more unified, more stable? Well, you are drowning in debt, division, and despair. The answer will burn through every lie you've ever been told, and once you see it, you don't go back. You realize it's not China that stole your future, it's the people who told you to hate China. It's the system that told you war was peace, poverty was your fault, and that the enemy was somewhere over there. No. The enemy built the prison you live in. The enemy taught you to call it freedom, and the enemy fears only one thing, an American who finally knows who the real enemy is. Revolution doesn't begin with guns, it begins with clarity. Clarity becomes courage. Now, let it spread. Now, let's be mindful that this was written by someone who was born in Vietnam and lives in Asia, sort of thing. So this is from that perspective, but I wanted to kind of reverse this because too often times the conversation is us versus them, there, and Trump has this whole idea of we're being taken advantage of, we're subsidizing Canada, we should just annex them, all this type of thing, and this kind of calls us to look at the problem from the other angle, and to start thinking about the system in a more holistic way that has us really evaluating, is the system working for us? Could we be, doing better by making sure that our infrastructure is good, that we have decent healthcare, all this type of thing, and why don't we have those things? And that maybe that instead of a trade war, that's what really matters, is, the lifestyle of people, what, actually makes life worth living in this country. And some of the comments were very interesting. And obviously there was a lot of, there's someone quoting Stalin, that's necessarily not, not great sort of thing. But I think it's important, I think, from a lot of the Chinese perspective, which oftentimes is propaganda written by the government. Let's remember that. That China is not this sort of backwards peasant place that it once was. It's become quite modern. Their manufacturing is sophisticated, all this sort of thing. Now, not that China's system is perfect. Lord knows it's not. And there's a lot of people who are unhappy with it, particularly Chinese young people who suffer from high employment. And who are causing a bit of political upheaval in China right now. And certainly not people who were, stuck inside, starving to death during zero COVID. The Chinese system is not perfect, but I think it does call for this idea of, is that the real enemy? Or is this whole problem that the American people aren't being prioritized for the things they need to live and thrive in society? And anyone who's listened to this show for any length of time knows my focus, my politics, essentially, is creating a society where everyone can thrive. Creating a society where when people thrive, society thrives. And when society thrives, so do the people. And that the society can never thrive if the people inside of it are not thriving. Does a trade war move us forward on that? Not really. And let's face it, people don't really want to work in factories. They don't want to go back to those jobs. They want the stability and the middle class upward mobility that came with it. That's what they're looking for. And I've said before, and I've said it again, one of the great mistakes we've made in the last 25 years is we have created a lot of jobs and a lot of value. It's happened in about a dozen cities, usually on a coast, except for Denver. It's happened in very few places. It's not spread out to the whole country. The new industries we've created in knowledge, information, expertise, and services take place in a handful of places. We're not, the economic growth that's happened over the last 25 years is not in Denison, Iowa, or Des Moines. It's not. It's in about a dozen major cities, usually on the coast, except for Denver. And that has left a lot of people in those places, particularly non-educated people in those places, feeling like they've been left behind. And they have been. The jobs that they might have worked are now in Shenzhen. And that's the problem that's worth fixing and addressing. And that's what this thread, from a Chinese perspective, you kind of ask the question of, is it China's fault or is our system lousy? And I think the answer is maybe a little bit of both. So that's enough of China and the trade war. We've done that for a half hour. So let's move on to some other news items of the week. And we're going to start with Biden and the ceasefire. So, job site news is great. This is investigative journalism. Excuse me. coming out of Israeli Channel 13. And it says here, God did the state of Israel a favor that Biden was the president during this period. We fought in Gaza for over a year, and the administration never came to us and said, ceasefire now. It never did, and that's not going to be taken for granted. That's not to be taken for granted. Former Israeli Ambassador Michael Herzog. A sweeping Israeli Channel 13 investigation has exposed the Biden administration's complicity in Israel's 19-month war on Gaza. 9 top Biden officials acknowledge avoiding real pressure on Israel, even as the death toll surpassed 30,000. Israeli leaders openly bragged they dragged out the war, playing for time until Donald Trump's return. Former National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Ambassador Tom Nides, and others defended their unwavering support for Israel, even as they admitted to enabling a campaign One USA described as killing and destroying for the sake of killing and destroying. And they revealed a few things here. 1, killing and destroying for the sake of killing and destroying. Elon Goldenberg, a senior national security aide, described the war's aimlessness. If they were never going to do this, it doesn't matter what the outcome is. Hamas is still going to control Gaza. You're just destroying for the sake of killing and destroying, but you're not building an alternative. 2, we fought over a year and the administration never said ceasefire now, and they bragged about it. 3, this is the good one. U.S. covered for Israeli war crimes and blocked aid report. State Department advisor Stacey Gilbert resigned after being cut out of the process of drafting a legally required arms compliance report. The final version cleared Israel violating U.S. law, despite overwhelming evidence of aid obstruction. Gilbert called it, quote, shocking in its mendacity, adding, everyone knows that it's not true. Even as settlers looted Gaza-bound trucks and Israel blocked humanitarian aid, Biden certified compliance and kept the weapons flowing. 4. Netanyahu sabotaged captives release talks to prolong the war. Biden officials revealed that Netanyahu deliberately tanked negotiations, fearing a deal would force him to end the war. American-Israeli hostage Hersh Goldberg Poland was scheduled for release the day he was executed. Amos Hochstein confirmed, quote, there's no doubt those hostages would be alive, unquote. Netanyahu's public campaign to retain control over Gaza's Philadelphia corridor was often seen by Biden officials as a smokescreen to kill the deal. 5. Biden backed Israel even after Netanyahu publicly undermined and insulted him. Biden once told Netanyahu he was, quote, full of shit, unquote, and hung up the phone mid-call. But as Ambassador Tom Nides put it, Biden saw Netanyahu as a manipulator, a magician, but stood by him through the end. In May 2024, Biden announced he was pausing a shipment of 2,000-pound bombs over concerns about their use in Gaza. Days later, Netanyahu accused the U.S. of freezing broader arms deliveries, reportedly pausing Biden's plans to restore the paused shipment. 6. Saudi deal collapsed because Israel refused to make any concessions. Biden officials described how a U.S.-Saudi normalization deal coupled with defense and economic pacts was nearly complete, but it required Israel to accept a political horizon for Palestinians. Dan Shapiro, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, explained, quote, we always understood that the Israeli government depended on far-right ministers who would try to block that commitment. That might require an election or a coalition shuffle. Former U.S. Ambassador Jack Lew called Israel's refusal to engage, quote, kind of shocking, unquote. Amos Hochstein said, quote, I don't understand the decision not to grab that opportunity as the most important strategic move Israel can make, unquote. Herzog claimed Netanyahu deliberately stalled, hoping Trump would return to office and take credit. Quote, it was my understanding that the Trump preferred for the deal to wait until he got into office so that he'd be the one to do it, unquote. And so when I came across this, need to follow these people actually. When I came across this, my first kind of thought was, I guess all the progressive people who were complaining about Gaza were right. But even beyond the ceasefire and the White House publicly saying they were asking for a ceasefire and never actually doing it, that's a whole thing. This whole thing is incredibly damning. And this is done by Israel's own media. The killing and destroying, never said ceasefire. Now, Israel being like, yeah, thank God they never actually asked for a ceasefire. But then also the way Netanyahu behind the scenes tanked deals, stop hostages from being released, complained about weapon shipments, all this type of thing. The Biden administration was falling all over themselves to back Israel entirely, and were not working behind the scenes for a ceasefire as said publicly, although it's rather interesting now when you think about that. If Kamala Harris was aware of all the Biden administration wasn't doing to stop the war, it makes her position on saying, I'm going to day one demand a ceasefire, seem actually a lot more radical. Because if they weren't doing anything, that makes her rather progressive, even though it seemed like not enough because everyone thought that they were trying to pressure them for a ceasefire. As it turns out, that wasn't so. In fact, her demanding a ceasefire would have been a major departure from what Biden was doing at the end. So I was just amazed. I probably read this 3 or 4 times this morning when I first came across it. And especially with how Israel has been in violation of laws for weapon shipments, never did anything, and, completely sneaking the Saudi Arabia deal, with normalization, all this type of thing. It's honestly, this is all quite damning. Great journalism by Israeli Channel 13 on this, and yeah, it was quite shocking when I kind of read through this whole thing and realized, folks, we've been flim-flammed. And if you are, passionate about ending this war as fast as possible, as I have been, and as I have always said, criticizing Israel is not anti-Semitic, it's not criticizing Jews. Jews happen to be in charge of the government. I don't care if purple people eaters were in charge of it. I would still complain. This shows that the Biden administration completely dropped the ball on trying to stop this war in Gaza. And Netanyahu and company were playing the long game, hoping that Trump would get in. They got their wish, and now they're going to really be able to do what they want, even though they were also doing it before. The Biden administration didn't do enough. They didn't, and it's here, and it's, Michael Herzog, and it's a quite sad and damning situation. There's no other way to put it. So we have a lot of other news stories, so let's move on, but that's a tough pill to process. Oh yes, DOGE. Let's read the New York Times before we read the Twitter thread. So, what Elon Musk didn't budget for: firing workers costs money too. An expert on the federal workforce estimates that the speed and chaos of Mr. Musk's cuts to the bureaucracy will cost taxpayers $135 billion this fiscal year, it says here. President Trump and Elon Musk promised taxpayers big savings, maybe even a DOGE dividend check in their mailboxes, when the Department of Government Efficiency was let loose from the federal government. Now, as he prepares to step back from his presidential assignment to cut bureaucratic fat, Mr. Musk has said, without providing details, that DOGE is likely to save taxpayers only $150 billion. That's about 15% of the $1 trillion he pledged to save, less than 8% of the $2 trillion in savings he had originally promised, and a fraction of the nearly $7 trillion the federal government spent on the 2024 fiscal year. The errors and obfuscations underlying DOGE's claims of savings are well documented. Less known are the costs Mr. Musk incurred by taking what Mr. Trump called a hatchet to government and the resulting firings, agency lockouts, and building seizures that mostly wound up in court. The Partnership for Public Service, a nonprofit organization that studies the federal workforce, has used budget figures to produce a rough estimate that firings, rehirings, lost productivity, and paid leave of thousands of workers will cost upward of $135 billion this fiscal year. At the Internal Revenue Service, a DOGE-driven excess of 22,000 employees would cost about $8.5 billion in revenue in 2026 alone, according to figures from the Budget Lab at Yale University. The total number of departures is expected to be as many as 32,000. Neither of these estimates includes the cost to taxpayers of defending DOGE's moves in court, of about 200 lawsuits and appeals related to Mr. Trump's agenda, or at least 30 implicate the department. Not only is Musk vastly overinflating the money he saved, he's not accounting for exponentially larger waste that he is creating, said Max Steyer, the chief executive of the Partnership for Public Service. Quote, he's inflicted these costs on the American people, who will pay for them for many years to come. It says, the law is clear, said Jerry Buchholz, who over 3 decades in public service handled hiring and firing at 7 different federal agencies, including NASA and the Defense Intelligence Agency. They can do all the things they're currently doing, but they can't do them the way they're doing them. They can either start over and do it right, or they can be in court forever. Harrison Fields, a White House spokesman, defended DOGE's cuts and called the $150 billion number the administration had saved monumental and historic. But is it, if the actual savings is only $20 billion? Like, And they go into some of the details of what is done, and we'll make mistakes and we'll fix them in max buyout. I mean, it's a quite long thing that goes into all of this. If you want to go read it, you should do so. Elizabeth Williamson is great. But the reality is that there's a lot to this, and this thread. I love it again. Love Spencer. It came in, and this is those are the CBS News version of the story that with only saving 160 billion, with $105 billion cost, even with the 10 billion difference between the New York Times and CBS News, we're still only really saving anywhere between what, 25 to 30 billion dollars, maybe. And we have also, the IRS has fewer people. That means less audits, all this sort of thing. They're going to collect less money. And so that all of this has, so even though there's been a lot of hubbub and excitement about all of this, one, Musk is leaving next week. So I don't even know who's going to be in charge of this. Vivek got sent away in December. Musk is trying to go save Tesla and getting out of government because he's mad about liberals being mad at him and everything. And all this sort of thing. And so now we've ended up with, basically taking a hatchet to the entire federal workforce. A lot of stuff's backed up in court, and we may have done all of this in the first 3 months they're in office for $20 to $25 billion of savings. And that's including things like USAID, all this type of thing. I mean, here's the thing that they kind of forget. One, you can fire federal workers, there's just a process for it. That's the first thing. The second thing is the big movers in federal spending are defense, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Now, Social Security is a self-funding program, so you're down to Medicare, Medicaid, and defense spending. If you really want to cut down the government, that's where you would cut the government down at, sort of thing. Going after the low-hanging and easy fruit is low-hanging and easy, but it's not going to put really any significant numbers on the board. Minus the fact you've done it in such a terrible way, you're going to cost more than you are saving. How silly is that? I heard a comment. Well, I mean, yes, so it's funny you should mention that in the comment section. Let me add this to yes. He got done when he wanted done. All those cases against companies went poof. Yes. Now, here's the thing. Literally the first comment on the Twitter thread. I prophesied this months ago. The entire purpose of DOGE is to destroy the bureaucracy that kept Musk's businesses in check and consumers safe. Also, it was to collect private data and sell it to the highest bidder. Saving money was never the point. I also think the other half of that equation, where saving money was also not the point, saving money also wasn't the point. It also, a big part of a lot of what the Trump administration is doing has nothing to do with saving money or trying to, and we're going to get to restoring equality and meritocracy, EO, here in a minute. It all has to do with getting rid of left power bases. Think of who they're attacking. NGOs, academia. These are all things that tend to hire and be ran by left. The point is to undo leftist centers of power, Democrat centers of power in this country. And there was actually something I thought I should have saved it, but I saw it today. And he said, I voted for them to make the left no longer a political force in this country. And there's an aspect, I don't think they're necessarily going to accomplish that, but they definitely are a lot of what is happening is kind of going in that direction. I do have a story about the Harvard lawsuit. We're going to get to it. I mean, yes, I mean, this is all, I mean, this has all been, honestly, a lot of kind of no point to any of this. Now, if they had come together, created a plan, and they did this in the 90s at the end of the Cold War because they wanted to draw down from Cold War posture. If they had put together a plan, taken the time to put together a plan and figured out the right way and process to do all of these things and started working through all of that in a big way, you could have done a lot relatively quickly. And they made a big thing about, oh, we've been, working all this time, and Project 2025 was like, no, this is a slash and burn operation that isn't even going to do that much. And it's all going to get tied up in court and mostly undone anyway. That's why process is important. Not slavishly so, but you do have to do something with it. If they had really wanted to do something, they could have gone into Congress and worked with Congress, because they have unified government, to pass some laws and done it more quickly. Trying to make DOGE do it, which is not a real department, again, still not a real department, do it has opened them up to a huge legal liability. And that's why a lot of this is not going to be going anywhere fast. So, Let's move on to an interesting bit of news. President Trump is expected to sign an executive order Monday that ensures truckers are adept at speaking English, America's official language, Breitbart News can reveal. A White House document on the expected executive order reviewed by Breitbart News, of course it was sent to Breitbart, aims to ensure those operating a commercial vehicle in the United States are qualified and proficient English speakers. Quote, President Trump believes that English is a non-negotiable safety requirement for professional drivers, as they should be able to read and understand traffic signs, communicate with traffic safety officers, border patrol, agricultural checkpoints, and cargo weight limit station personnel, and provide and receive feedback and directions in English, the document notes. Under the anticipated order, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy will be directed to, quote, rescind and replace guidance to strengthen inspection procedures for compliance with English proficiency requirements per the White House document. For years, an existing federal standard that commercial drivers read and speak English, quote, has not been enforced, unquote, per the document. The expected order, quote, mandates revising out-of-service criteria to ensure drivers violating English proficiency rules are placed out of service, enhancing roadway safety. Duffy will also be tasked with evaluating protocols for the authenticity verification of CDL's commercial driver's licenses. Moreover, Duffy is directed to improve the working conditions of truck drivers through additional administrative, regulatory, or enforcement actions under the anticipated executive order. And this goes along with Trump took executive action in March to establish English as the official language of the United States. And that was likely signed because it was supposed to be signed at 5 p.m. Eastern, and it's now almost 8 o'clock. So, that's a new thing. Given the number of, especially Indians and others driving trucks these days, I'm kind of not surprised about this. It's definitely gotten a lot more crazy out there on the road, but the reality is trucking used to be a good, solid, middle-class job. Hasn't been for decades. And for that one, you can blame deregulation of trucking, and you can blame that on Jimmy Carter, a Democrat. Isn't it fun when we get to blame Democrats? I enjoy that too. Now, semaphore, which I love, so this story has kind of come out. I actually need to be on their email list. Let me put this in real quick, because I follow them on Twitter and I need their newsletter, so I can cover stuff that they cover better than I haven't. So this, let me give the background for this first. So, a lot of tech oligarchs and others have been in sort of these private group chats plotting and planning their projects for our country. And some of these have finally come out. It says, last Thursday morning, a bit before 10 a.m. in Austin and 11 p.m. in Singapore, Joe Lonsdale had had enough of Balaji Srinivasan's views on China. Quote, this is insane CCP thinking, unquote. Lonsdale, a co-founder of Palantir, wrote to a 300-member Signal group. Quote, not sure what leaders hang out with you in Singapore, but on this you've been taken over by a crazy China mind virus. Srinivasan, a former Coinbase chief technology officer and influential tech figure who now lives in the city-state, responded that China, quote, executed extremely well over 45 years. Any analysis that doesn't take that into account makes it seem like the U.S. could have held it back, unquote. It was a normal, robust disagreement among friends in a friendly space, as both raced to X to declare after I emailed them about it. And it was just another day in Chatham House, a giant and raucous Signal group that forms part of the sprawling network of influential private chats that began during the fervid early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, and which have fueled a new alliance of tech and the U.S. right. That same week in Chatham House, Lonsdale and Democratic billionaire Mark Cuban sparred over affirmative action, and Cuban and Daily Wire founder Ben Shapiro discussed questions of culture and work ethic. This constellation of rolling elite political conversations revolved primarily around the venture capitalist Mark Andreessen and a circle of Silicon Valley figures. None of their participants were surprised to see Trump administration officials firing off secrets and emojis on the platform last month. I did not have the good fortune to be accidentally added to one of these chats, which can be said to make messages disappear after just 30 seconds. But their influence flows through X, Substack, and podcasts, and constitutes a kind of dark matter of American politics and media. The group chats aren't always primarily a political space, but they are the single most important place in which a stunning realignment toward Donald Trump was shaped and negotiated, an alliance between Silicon Valley and the new right formed. The group chats are, quote, the mimetic upstream of mainstream opinion, unquote, wrote one of their key organizers, Siram Krishnan, a former partner in the venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz, typically styled A16Z, who is now the White House Senior Policy Advisor for AI.
Of course, these are hardly the only power group chats. Anti-Trump liberals are now coordinating their responses on Signal. There are group chats for black political elites and morning show producers. A vast and influential parallel set of tech conversations takes place on WhatsApp. There's a big China-friendly group over on WeChat. Elite podcasters have one. It's the same thing happening on both sides, and I'm amazed at how much this is coordinating our reality, says the writer Thomas Chatterton Williams, who was for a time a member of the group chat with Andreessen. If you weren't in the business at all, you'd think everyone was arriving at conclusions independently, and they're not. It's a small group of people who talk to each other and overlap between politics and journalism and a few industries. But there's no equivalent to the intellectual counterculture that grew up over the last 5 years on the tech right, and no figure remotely like Andreessen, the towering, enthusiastic 53-year-old who co-founded A16Z and before that invented the modern web browser. In February, he described the group chats to the producer Lex Friedman as, quote, the equivalent of samizdat, unquote, the self-published Soviet underground press. In a soft authoritarian age of social media shaming and censorship, quote, the combination of encryption and disappearing messages really unleashed, unquote, he said. The chats he wrote recently helped produce our national, quote, vibe shift, unquote. The chats are occasionally marked by the sort of thing that would have gotten you scolded on Twitter in 2020, and which would pass unremarked on X in 2025. They have rarely been discussed in public, though you can catch the occasional mention, for instance, a podcast debate between Cuban and Republican entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, which started in a chat. But they are made visible through a group consensus on social media. Their effects have ranged from the mainstreaming of the monarchist pundit Curtis Yarvin to a particularly focused and developed dislike of the former Washington Post writer Taylor Lawrence. They succeeded in avoiding leaks until Tomasi sent this article, in part because Signal and WhatsApp's disappearing message features, and in part because the groups had formed out of a mix of fear and disdain for journalists they believed were, quote, out to get us, as one member put it. And so it goes on with more kind of reporting. I thought this has kind of been the story du jour. It's quite long, as you can tell. But the fact, I mean, it's really an interesting sort of, I mean, obviously this isn't new, elites getting together chatting. That's not new. I think what's kind of novel about this is the platform it's happening on. There's, it's kind of perfect because there's no record of it, only those inside know sort of thing, and this has all kind of gone under the radar until it's come out with Ben Smith. Who's finally tried to say, like, yeah, the action's not happening on social media anymore. It's happening on Signal. It's super secret. And everyone is... It's becoming a sort of American elite groupthink that's happening in the sort of clandestine area. And everyone's starting to say that. And that's why I think sometimes it seems like, it's like, oh, yeah, everyone, has the same message at the same time and it's coming to the same conclusion. And it's all... Yeah. It's all happening on... WhatsApp and Signal. So, like I said, this kind of hit Twitter this morning. It's a very interesting, what am I trying to say? A very interesting, sort of, I wouldn't call it a scandal. It's not a scandal. It's an interesting perspective on how these things are happening, how things are happening behind the scenes. I think calling it the dark matter of America's political landscape is really interesting because it's really happening very much behind the scenes. And one wonders, I wish I was on any of those group chats. I am in a couple for journalists, but I'd like to be in Mark Andreessen's group. It seems like fun. But they would never have me. I'd ask too many questions. Alright, let's get through the last of these stories. And then I'm out of here. Because my voice is dying because I've been talking all day. So, this I thought was interesting on the remote work front. Remote work is here to stay, especially if you speak English. Says here, a sweeping Stanford-led survey of 16,000 college-educated workers across 40 countries finds that the average employee now works from home 1.27 days per week. A figure virtually unchanged from 2023. Says here, the most striking pattern in the data is regional. Anglophone countries lead the world in remote work. Canadians and Britons average only 2 days a week at home, with Americans close behind at 1.6. By contrast, the practice is far less common in continental Europe and East Asia. In South Korea, for example, the average is just 0.5. So what explains this divergence? According to the study, culture is the primary driver. Using Dutch psychologist Geert Hofstede's framed individualism index, the authors found a strong correlation. The more individualistic a country, the more it embraces remote work. As shown in the chart below, English-speaking nations are the most individualistic and the most likely to work from home. We see them here: Canada, Britain, the United States, Australia.
In contrast, East Asian countries are the least individualistic and least likely to work from home. Here we have China, South Korea, Japan, even Mexico, Nigeria, India. In these highly individualistic societies, managers tend to place greater trust in employees to perform without constant oversight. Workers, in turn, view productivity as a personal responsibility driven by guilt, rather than a collective obligation driven by shame. Nowhere is this ethos more deeply ingrained than in the U.S., where a long-standing tradition of Jeffersonian individualism exalts the self-reliant homesteader and casts suspicion on the crowded urban panopticon. Bottom line, remote work is here to stay, especially in the Anglosphere. I don't really have anything to say about this other than I thought it was interesting that they correlated individualism with working with remote work and more collectivists with, with less at home work. I thought that was interesting. Um, and I think work from home is going to be here to stay for certain people in certain industries at a certain skill level. I think it's going to be, I think, especially for top performers and very talented people, it's going to be very hard to get people back in the office because people have gotten a taste of freedom and they're not going to let it go. And particularly if you work in, one of these places, you're going to be doing well. So, on the immigration front, you might remember that President Trump wanted to cancel legal status for a bunch of international students, and they have reversed course. It says here, the Trump administration on Friday abruptly moved to restore thousands of international students' ability to study in the United States legally, but immigration officials insisted they could still try to terminate that legal status despite a wave of legal challenges. The decision, revealed during a court hearing in Washington, was a dramatic shift by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, even as the administration characterized it as only a temporary reprieve. The back and forth only contributed to the anxiety and confusion facing international students as the administration has moved to cancel more than 1,500 student visas in recent weeks. The changes on Friday came amid a wave of individual lawsuits filed by students who said they were notified their legal right to study in the United States was rescinded, often with minimal explanation. In some cases, students had minor traffic violations or other infractions, but in other cases, there appeared to be no obvious cause for the revocations. Upon learning that their records have been deleted from the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System, or SEVIS, scores of students have sued to preserve their status, producing a flurry of emergency orders by judges blocking the changes by ICE. We have not reversed course on a single visa revocation, said Tricia McLaughlin, a Homeland Security Department spokeswoman. What we did is restore SEVIS access for people who had not had their visa revoked. It was not clear how many student visa holders have left the country to date after their records were deleted. Facing the prospect of arrest, at least a handful have left before risking deportation. But the Trump administration had stoked panic among students who found themselves under the threat of detention and deportation. A handful of students, including a graduate student at Cornell, have voluntarily left the country after abandoning their legal fight. And that is kind of honestly the whole story. Again, I get what they're trying to do. This ain't the way to do it. I think if you want to issue fewer student visas, great. If you want to review students who have visas, great. If you want to start getting rid of kids for minor traffic violations, harsh, but okay. I think it's dumb, but okay. This isn't working, and it's not even working for them. So, also, I mean, one of America's great advantages is being the place students want to come and study. And then they stay, or they get jobs, they pay taxes, all this type of thing. And now, no one's going to want to come here. I mean, every week we've covered tourists getting turned away, students getting, their visas revoked. All this sort of thing. This is, terrible and unsustainable. So, all right. Let's see. What do we have? Oh, disparate impact. And okay. We're not going to do Harvard. We will come back to disparate impact next week. We'll also talk about restoring equality of opportunity and meritocracy next week as well, because those two stories actually kind of go together. But here's the reality. My voice is failing. I can feel it. My throat is dry. I've done 3 interviews today plus the Newshour. So my voice is failing. My throat is dry. We'll do those stories next week. I promise. In the meanwhile, thank you all for watching. My name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal... Cameron Journal Newshour, not podcast Newshour. Cameron Journal Newshour. If you want my social links, newsletter, all that fun stuff, I'm not going to do all the links right now because, again, my voice is failing. CameronJournal.com. They're right at the top. Feel free to sign up for the newsletter. And don't forget to join Cameron Journal Plus. We've had a lot of new people join Cameron Journal Plus and support the show and the Cameron Journal, which is amazing. So make sure to check that out and join that. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all next week. Thank you all so much for watching. Get the newsletter on Saturday. Today's interview is really great. It's with Rob Wolf, and he wrote a memoir / biography of his parents who were Holocaust survivors. So the press that prints these books really loves to send people on my show. So go check out Rob Wolf's interview this week, and I will see you next Monday. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Bye-bye now.